Hi, so I'm Adam Goldberg. I'm one of the founders of Standard Crypto, an early stage crypto focused venture capital firm in San Francisco. And I'm pleased to be joined by Roneil Rumburg, the CEO and founder of Audius, who has been a longtime friend, but also someone we've been very fortunate to partner with since the seed. So to start off, I'm a VC, and everyone knows that VCs love using this for that type analogies. And many people have compared Audius to a decentralized Spotify or SoundCloud. But I want to make sure that the audience can hear it in your own words, Roneil. Can you tell us a little bit about Audius to start?
Hey everyone, and yeah, definitely excited to be here. So, at a super high level, Audius is a music community and discovery platform that connects artists and fans directly with one another. That's a big mouthful. What it means in practice is this is a tool chain that helps artists build a fan base, manage that fan base, gather data about that fan base, and ultimately to monetize that fan base they build up here over time. And the way that we achieve that is by being fully decentralized. So there's a network of node operators that are actually hosting all this content, hosting all this metadata, and then indexing that metadata to make it more discoverable in concert with the artists and fans that are supporting the network. Yeah, it's been a pretty fun ride the last 4 or 5 years. So today the Audius network serves about 6.5 million people every month on the listener side, and over 250,000 artists.
So yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of things to unpack here, but I guess firstly, why build on the blockchain? Right? Like, what experience can you provide your users that wouldn't simply just be better and easier on top of a centralized database?
Yeah, it's such a great question and a great place to start here. I think the biggest difference that being decentralized can bring here is the kind of complete removal of intermediaries sitting between the artist and fans. So just to give you all, or kind of paint the picture of how music is today, music's a $42 billion a year industry, and that covers recorded music, concerts, merch, everything all in. Artists capture only 12% of that total right now. The other 88% is being captured by a multitude of different parties, distributors, existing bigger tech platforms for sharing music, et cetera, et cetera. That was really where the inspiration for Audius kind of came from, was seeing so many of my co-founder Forrest and I's friends who were musicians just feeling disenfranchised from and kind of incapable of having any say in how these platforms develop, and that kind of leading to this kind of continuous cycle of platforms growing in prominence, making decisions that were kind of out of spec with what was likely best for the community, and then falling by the wayside. So it's not blockchain so much that's important for Audius as decentralization is, and using blockchains at the center. So Audius uses Ethereum and Solana fairly actively for different parts of the system. That was a key enabler to be decentralized, but it wasn't actually, I guess it wasn't like the reason for Audius to be built in this way. It was ultimately it was ultimately about having a mechanism for incentive alignment and coordination of all these parties that could provide a single source of truth for certain sets of data that are important to the Audius network. That's where kind of the role of these blockchains fits in.
Yeah, and you mentioned incentives, right? And I guess in many ways, users will follow artists and their content. So this sort of begs the question, if you look at the same equation from now the artist's point of view, what are the benefits to streaming their music on a decentralized platform like Audius?
Yeah, the key benefits are really this around this level of directness of that interaction with fans. As an artist on Audius, who your fans are, where they are, how they found your music, and how much they're engaging with it, right? So you can actually get this rich data back from that. You can answer questions like, how many fans do I have in Cleveland? And maybe I should play a show in that market because I have a large fan base, or maybe I shouldn't because there's no one really there. So, it's kind of crazy to say, just because, in tech, we all take for granted that if you put a Google Analytics tag on your website, you know everything you need to know about the people using it for the most part, right? It's like very, very easy. In music, folks really don't have access to that sort of data. Like an artist that has a few million monthly listeners on a platform like Spotify, for example, they're typically getting quarterly reports, or reports that are quite quite stale by the time they're getting them. And folks are working on more real time tooling and information there. But ultimately, as an artist, you're dependent on these platforms deciding they should share that data with you or shouldn't. Whereas in the case of Audius, it's actually kind of a default part of the network, right? That data is actually just open to anyone and everyone to build with. So yeah, I think that's really where we've seen the key here. And there are a lot of downstream effects of that. So as an artist, being able to better segment and target your fans has generally led to being able to monetize fans on average at a higher rate. But it all kind of comes back from giving the artist ownership of that relationship they have with their fans, and then portability around that relationship, being able to carry that relationship between different experiences, different products, et cetera. And lastly, being able to get all the data back from that relationship that's generated through interaction.
Yeah, and in some way, you're sort of describing communities around individual artists. And I think when, as a crypto investor, when you think about communities, you often also think about NFTs. Is there a role that NFTs play in this story, or will play in the future?
Yeah, there definitely is. So today, Audius has a number of features that are kind of directed at sorry about that, by the way. Audius has a number of features that are directed at helping aggregate, display, and provide utility around NFTs. So as a creator using Audius today, you can curate your collection of NFTs that you've either issued or owned on this collectibles page. And then if folks click through those NFTs, they actually get to see what market the NFT trades in or exists in at the moment. Similarly, there's a playlist feature for music NFTs. So if you have music NFTs in your wallet that you've collected via Audius, you can actually share those in a curated playlist. You click play and play through it. Our thinking is that that's sort of like the equivalent of the mixtape in this era, right? Where you can sort of show off your collection of music NFTs. And then some of the things coming down the pipe are, probably obvious to the observer, but providing additional utility around those NFTs. So if I, as a fan, show up and I hold, Adam, one of your NFTs in your budding rap career that I know is coming along, I could actually potentially get access to different modes of engagement and different experiences from you through proving my ownership. So as things stand, I think the plan in our community that's gained the most support and traction is not for Audius to be an issuer of music NFTs, but to be a source of distribution and utility for them. So, there are 6.5, 7 million people on Audius every month. That's by far the largest Web3 native audience for these sorts of music NFTs, right? I think that's where many partners and other organizations in the crypto ecosystem who are issuing NFTs can leverage these open tools and open audiences to reach more fans.
Yeah, those are all great points. I mean, it's interesting to think about, right? NFTs as sort of analogs to, limited edition t-shirts at concerts, but also like a way to maybe get exposure to even an artist's, revenue stream, or just a way to feel closer to them generally. And I guess that brings up another interesting broader point, which is sort of what will or won't need to change with consumer behavior as music moves into Web3. Like, what are the things that, won't be patterns that exist anymore, will be really common in the future?
Yes, such a great question. And I think this one is worth putting in the context of some history here, right? So, if you look at how the recorded music industry developed over the last, really 70 plus years, I guess. The market for recorded music only came into existence around records like LP, physical records. Before that, it wasn't really possible to monetize recorded music. There was radio, and there were other mechanisms to get audience and reach, but those channels didn't monetize very well. So the kind of LP record was really the first incantation of this, and it created this collector sort of culture that ended up persisting through different forms of media that came later for music. So think, the 8-track tapes to cassette tapes to CDs to, even in the early 2000s, as music made the transition to being purely digital and without any physical incantation. The first iterations of that were like iTunes, pay per track, right? And there was still this mentality of the music fan of collecting, right? It's this collecting music, curating music, and then sort of displaying to their friends and to the world, like, what music do they like as kind of a source of and sense of this identity, right? So I think the rise of streaming over the last 10 years has sort of, taken away that collecting aspect of music, right? When all music is effectively free, once you're beyond paying your $10 a month or what have you, there isn't really any kind of collectible nature associated with that. And what kind of thinking through that made me realize was that scarcity is a kind of key component of collectability, right? Where, CDs, for example, weren't scarce in that there wasn't a limited number of them, but the price of them made them scarce, right? Like, I couldn't have a collection of 100,000 CDs because that would cost, $2 million plus to collect, right? And that created, from the consumer behavior perspective, a sense of scarcity with how much music they could experience, and required a level of thoughtfulness about what they collected that doesn't really exist today. So, all that is to say, I don't think it's a bad thing that went away. I think it is a streaming generally is a better experience for consumers, but I think there are aspects of collectability that I think are coming back, and Web3 is what's driving that, right? Because we now have the opportunity to create scarcity once again. But I think the current crypto ecosystem's way of thinking around this is quite reductive in nature, right? I don't think, and I think there's a place for this. Let's have 5 collectors, 10 collectors spending at very, very high levels. But I think there's also a place for that kind of CD equivalent, right? The 9 or 10-year-old fan of the artist who's first engaging with music for the first time to be able to access additional exclusive content and ways of engaging with their artist at a price point that's accessible. I think that market is far larger and more interesting than the market that exists for these extremely high priced kind of interactions. So yeah, long story short, I think that's where things are headed. I think the the opportunity for products to come into the world today, I think exists around rekindling this behavior pattern of collectability, right? Last thought I'll close with on this. I think merchandise really over the last 10 years has been what's filled that role for the average fan, being able to wear a sweatshirt or a hat or what have you, to kind of represent and show that someone's a fan of a given artist. But there really is no digital form of collectability, and there's really no collectability around music itself that exists at the moment.
I guess it'll be exciting to see what happens with music NFTs, especially because they are sort of a digitally native collectible. It's 100% gross margin. But a lot of the points you raise are really about sort of bundling and unbundling of collections, even, and aggregation, disaggregation. And that brings up an interesting question on the other side of the equation, which is what happens to labels in our Web3 future? Do they go away? Do they change entirely?
Yeah, so your point you just brought up, I think, is a really apt one for this question, which is that digital distribution of music is 100% gross margin, right? There's no effectively zero cost of reproduction, whereas I think 15, 20 years ago, it did cost real money to make a CD and to put it in a truck and drive it to Tower Records or Best Buy, and then it's taking up retail shelf space. All of those things, even if the CD itself only cost, like 50, 70 cents or what have you to make, the cost of distributing it was actually quite high. And in today's world, that's not the case. So what's already played out over the last 15, 20 years, I think, is a remaking of the business model for the record label, where the label's kind of key value add at that time was that they had this massive physical distribution network, right? A label could push a button and push a given record into stores nationwide, worldwide, and then deal with potentially the problems that can arise from that, right? There's a lot of risk, right? If you push a record for national release in that era and it doesn't sell well, the label is actually on the hook for return of merchandise that was unsold and can lose substantial amounts of money in the process. So there was a ton of risk there, and what the label served in that era as this kind of underwriter of that form of risk, right? In today's world, obviously that risk doesn't exist because the cost of distributing music has gone to zero. But the labels are very much aware of that, and I think have pretty effectively remade their business models into kind of this agency-like structure, where as an artist you can show up to the label and say, hey, I want to produce this record in these ways, and the label can sort out for you studio time and getting you with producers and songwriters and kind of organizing that whole process. Then it can also handle marketing of the content and all of these things and really make that process. There's a lot of shared overhead, right, between artist A and B, who are both in the same genre. They probably have to do the same sorts of things, right? And for the label as kind of an effective agency to share those resources becomes very effective. So I actually think that's still a really effective value added part of the value chain. I think labels will continue to exist and to thrive. I think what's really fascinating though is in 20 or 30 years ago, you needed a label, right? It wasn't possible to reach a mainstream audience or broad distribution without a label. I think today it is. And that's led to a more healthy dynamic where, I think actually the labels, remaking themselves in this fashion has created a healthier dynamic where they're having to continuously demonstrate their value to artists and to stay top of mind and exciting for them.
Awesome. Well, I think we only have time for one last question, which is a very simple one. So for everyone in the audience, what's your favorite track on Audius?
That's the most important question. I'm going to reserve my judgment. It's like picking a favorite child. There are over 1 million tracks on the network now too, so I haven't gotten to hear everything yet. But someday, hopefully, I can sit for like 10 years and just list it.
It'll be longer than that. Well, great. Thank you so much for having us.
All right. Thank you so much to Adam Goldberg from Standard Crypto, talking to Roneil Rumburg from Audius about bringing Web3 to the masses. At Water Music, where I work, we're watching and following these companies that are helping creators and fans connect in the space. And it's so great to hear directly from the founders. And I just wish we had more time with everyone.